Hi everyone, my name is Gabriel and this is the Hour of the Raven, your channel for everything Ravenloft, RPG, Dungeons and Dragons, and horror.
Today we shall explore the past and secrets of the Ilithid God Brain, revealing the mysteries and horrors behind this monstrous alien entity. Before we begin, some brief announcements and clarifications. Bluetspur is a domain that first appeared in the first box of the setting, the Ravenloft Realm of Terror, and later had further developments in the Forbidden Lore box set, and one of the first adventures in the Ravenloft setting, called Dwarfs of Darkness. After these initial appearances, the domain was removed from the core in the event of the Grand Conjunction, but it did not have much development after this relocation. During the final period of 3rd edition, the Wizard of the Coast website published an excellent short story written by Ari Marmel about a patient in an asylum who had a mysterious connection to Blutspur. Blutspur was reintroduced for 5th edition in the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and despite minor discrepancies at some descriptions, it remains largely similar to its previous characterization. For the first time in an official material, there was a short attempt to establish a history of the Ilithid God Brain, the Dark Lord of the domain. Throughout all these years of gap until 5th edition reintroduced the domain, many fans created material to expand the domain. An idea I first saw on the Fraternity of Shadows forums and netbooks, and which was also explored by Mistfactor Press in the book Ravenloft Encyclopedia of Dark Lords and Domains, was that Blutspur was not an island of dread in the mists, but was moved to the moon that shines over the skies of the demiplane of dread. We also used this idea in our first Black Feather book, The Dread Space, in which we present space-themed domains of dread in a Spelljammer and Ravenloft crossover. Given the little material we have on the domain, and the absence of a gazetteer of the region, I decided that in the next Blutspur videos I will also present as complementary information the material we wrote about Blutspur in our book Dread Space. So there is no confusion about what is official setting material and what is material by the Black Feather. I will leave the Black Feather logo whenever the material presented is taken directly from the Dread Space, to make it easier for those of you who are watching this video to separate our creation from the material created by the official Ravenloft authors. The Ilithid God Brain does not have his past described in the old books of the Ravenloft setting, and the 5th edition only presents a few lines about his past. So, for this video about the Ilithid God Brain, we will use a significant portion of the material we wrote for the Dread Space, in which we created a dark past for the Ilithid God Brain and the tragedy of the Tani civilization. If you like our ideas for the Dread Space, I will also leave the link below for our book, which presents 10 domains of dread, with a space horror theme, and presents a cluster of domains known as Dread Space. Are you ready? After being subjected to the mental pain conditioning experiments in Dr. the Cloud Heinfroth's asylum, we are sent through a portal to the wastelands of Blutspur as emissaries to encounter an alien and monstrous entity. Captured by the Mind Flayers, we are taken to the underground citadel and subjected to horrible experiments. When they identify in our minds that we are emissaries of Dr. Dominiani with a message for their leader, we are taken to the God's Chamber to prostrate ourselves before the alien monstrosity of the Ilithid God Brain. Subjected to the mental conditioning of Dr. the Cloud Heinfroth, we present to the Ilithid God Brain the proposal of an alliance. The Cloud would send him suitable sacrifices to room 319 of his asylum, and in return he wished to receive from Blutspur fragments of their vast knowledge about the mysteries of the mind. It is impossible to predict the creature's reaction to our arguments, but soon our minds are invaded by this transcendental creature. Taken by this alien force, the creature shows its contempt for the proposal and makes us a promise of pain and agony, while it will empty our minds and destroy our bodies. Before total annihilation, however, while our minds are connected, perhaps to exercise his godhood, or through some incomprehensible kind of vanity, we are given glimpses of the dark past of this alien entity. Hour of Raven. Fool, how dare you bring yourself into my presence? You should have been content with your insignificance and ignorance. Know, mortal, that there is no escape from my reach, and to contemplate me is to descend into the abyss of your own mind. I have seen worlds crumble and civilizations fall, but still I stand, and the universe trembles at my very existence. I will be the master, unveiling the curtains of your fragile reality, and your feeble attempts to understand my divine essence will only lead you to despair and ruin. The Ilithid God Brain is the Dark Lord of Blutspur. He is an Ilithid Elder Brain, a classic monster from the Dungeons and Dragons, but with even more connections to themes of cosmic horror and body horror that turn him into something incomprehensible and transcendental. Some of the characteristics that were given to Blutspur and the Ilithid God Brain draw inspiration from various literary and cinematography works. Mind projection and possession by alien entities may be inspired by tales such as H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow Out of Time. Films like Alien and other space horrors could also be interesting inspirations for the desolate landscape and environment of Blutspur. The constant abductions and experiments carried out by the Illithids may be inspired by countless reports of alien abduction cases, or by films such as Fire in the Sky or the television series The X-Files. The Ilithid God Brain is an amalgamation of several dead Mind Flayer brains that are bound together into a slimy mass. This brain has some grotesque tentacles coming out of its cerebral matter, and is of an enormous size. Those who look closely at the brain see that it has a sickly dark color in some spots, as if it is suffering from some type of disease, which is slowly taking over its body. The Ilithid God Brain is a cosmic entity that is difficult to understand, and in most cases will consider the life and presence of other creatures that it deems inferior as irrelevant, a mere distraction to be annihilated without further consideration if it gets in its way. The entity has the accumulated knowledge of thousands of mind flayers, and has also probed the minds of powerful creatures across the universe, in search of unspeakable secrets and power. He has an alien mind, and knows about cosmic horrors that are far beyond the knowledge of a mortal mind. Despite all this knowledge, this cosmic horror is dominated by the mind and personality of an abusive megalomaniac man, and sometimes traits of this human personality can prevail in his behavior. During the adventure Dwarfs of Darkness, the Ilithid God Brain does not receive any stats. The encounter with this creature in the adventure is lethal, and only through the intervention of an NPC in a pre-programmed event of the adventure, the characters escape from destruction. The Ilithid God Brain sends powerful suicidal impulses into the minds of the heroes, and those who failed a spell resistance test with a -10 penalty every round would inflict themselves the maximum damage of their weapons. Those who resist the mental command spend all their energy resisting this impulse and are unable to act. In the book Domains of Dread, he finally receives stats, but his past and powers remain vague and undefined. he always managed to establish contact with the minds of his victims, and knows all the psionic science and devotions. Any attempt to resist his mental effects is made with a -10 penalty on the rolls. The Ilithid God Brain did not receive any stats in the 3rd edition, and during 5th edition in the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, they only mention that he has the same stats of a regular Elder Brain. In our book Dreadspace, we created stats for the Ilithid God Brain, making him one of the most dangerous Dark Lords in the Land of the Mists, with a challenge rating of 29. Our version of the Ilithid God Brain is capable of great psionic feats, with rules adapting the suicidal impulses foreseen in the original Thoughts of Darkness adventure, psionic blasts, force fields, and even mass domination. Despite his immense power, the Ilithid God Brain is cursed by the dark powers. His imprisonment in the mists is a great obstacle for his quest for psionic knowledge, and a blockage to his megalomaniacal plans to ascend as a god. The limits of his domain and the prison of the mists also prevents the projection of his mind and psionic energy beyond the limits of Blutspur, and he now depends on the actions of his Ilithid servants to peer into distant regions with the use of the probe. The only role that he can wield using the probe machine is to be a source of psionic power, allowing the machine to torture him and temporarily drain his capabilities. His large cerebral mass is also in constant conflict. Although the enormous brain has great mental powers, it lives in constant conflict as the countless amalgamated Ilithid brains still try to somehow expel the dominant mind that has taken control of their brain. The madness of this dominant entity also seems to contaminate the brain, which is gradually taken over by Paranoia. He suffers from a degenerative disease that slowly consumes his brain tissue, and must strive to avoid being consumed by this disease. Due to this fragile state of health, he needs to remain in the pool of chemicals and nutrients. He needs to be constantly treated by his servants to prevent his degeneration. Once immortal, the God Brain now must find a way to restore his health, or suffer a slow death and watch his power decline. The Ilithid God Brain became the Dark Lord of Blutspur after attempting to gain psionic knowledge and turning against his own race of Illithids. A great psionic clash with other Elder Brains devastated the region, and he was swallowed up by the mists to become the Dark Lord of Blutspur. The Ilithid God Brain can close the borders of its domain by invoking a powerful electrical storm, capable of devastating anyone who gets in its way with its red lightnings. In the underground, his absolute knowledge of alien technology and biomancy, in addition to his vast gifts of telekinesis, allow him to control the opening and closing of rocky passages, and even collapse tunnels on those he wishes to trap in the depths. But what secrets surround this mysterious and incomprehensible alien entity? What macabre and sinister acts transformed the grotesque Elder Brain into the Dark Lord of this wasteland? The origin and tragedy and rise to power of the Ilithid God Brain is not found in the ancient and remote past of the Mind Flayers, but rather in the peaceful civilization of the Tan, in some unknown world of the material plane. Legends say that the Tan were a peaceful and reclusive people, and that they sought the isolation of the mountains for their religious meditation practices. Governed by a council of elders, the masters of the Tani were capable of extraordinary feats of the mind, and devoted their time to learning and developing their mental gifts. A rigid hierarchy structure marked master and apprentices, and children with psionic potential were quickly identified and taken for a long training and improvement of their talents. The circumstances of fate were different. Perhaps the psionic master would have remained isolated and dedicated to the art and philosophy, However, the arrival of a power of psionic in their midst would change their destiny forever. Doj was a child with extraordinary psionic talent, and even without training, he demonstrated great telepathic and telekinetic capability, and was even capable of dominating and imposing his will on other people. Identified by the Tan, he was separated from his family to become an apprentice at the monastery of Mount Macab. Doj quickly stood out among the students, and in short time surpassed even his masters in psionic disciplines. He was the youngest student to reach the rank of initiate and the youngest master of the order, but Doj had equally boundless ambition. Contrary to what the Council of Elders preached, Master Doj was not content with the peace and contemplation of the monasteries, or the use of mental disciplines only for peaceful purpose. His preachings divided his community. Deluded by his dreams of power and obsessed with becoming the greatest psionic masters of all time, he used his disciple to gain knowledge of the secrets of the mind. Tani's society soon became too small for his dreams of power, and he began to plan his next steps. Some saw him as a chosen one, someone endowed with great talent who would come to illuminate the world and guide civilization to a new era. The ancient masters, however, perceived him as an abusive figure, capable of enslaving others to his mental commands, and who reveled in his power. Doj mentally enslaved those who opposed his rule, and his followers helped him violently eliminate any opposition in the monastery. His rapid conquest soon led him to take bolder steps in his plans, and under his leadership, the once peaceful Tani began an insidious plan of conquest of neighboring nations. He sent his most powerful disciples to infiltrate the courts of other kingdoms and use their mental powers to discover their secrets, sabotage their defense, and dominate and enslave their leaders, preparing them for conquest. When Doj finally decided to attack, he took most of his enemies by surprise, with many nation leaders mentally dominated, surrendering their kingdoms to him. Some tried to resist the rule of the Tani, but Doj hunted them down and slaughtered them, using his mental powers to uncover betrayals even before they occurred. Official records from this time demonstrate how the glorious Master Doj led civilizations into an enlightened era of progress and peace, putting an end to all types of conflict. The reality, however, is that his rise to power was marked by violence and brutality, and that the ruler's submission to his power was no different from the mental enslavement he imposed to those who challenged him. Master Doj became December Doj, the great emperor of the Tani, and his reign was long. The peace achieved under his government, however, came at a high price. He ruled through fear and paranoia, with his disciple monitoring the thoughts of the conquered population to find dissenters. Those who were discovered with thoughts of treason were immediately imprisoned, and before their executions had their minds searched for secrets and for fellow traitors, leading to a trail of executions at the hands of his inquisitors. Although his powers were great, so was his isolation. He probed the minds of many, but he also feared betrayal from his own disciples, fearing that one of them might one day depose him for his throne. In his madness and paranoia, he accused and executed many of his followers, and even members of his own family. Paranoid and isolated in his position of power, he devised a way to increase his power and control. He developed a powerful machine called the Probe, which could amplify his psionic powers, allowing him to project the scope of his mind and invade and control the minds of others over great distances. With this machine, he could have absolute control of his empire, and even reach other worlds and outer planes. To power this mechanism, however, He needed to imprison and drain other psionics of their mental powers, leaving them empty and insane after years of torment. His own people became victims of this machine. To power the probe, he imprisoned and drained almost everyone who held psionic powers, even his own loyal disciples. Obsessed with his power, he used the probe to search the universe for psionic secrets. He contacted a multitude of strange alien species and creatures from the outer planes, and conceived secrets that humanity was not destined to understand. As time passed, his fragile human body began to decay, and he searched for a way to prolong his life and rule. He began to dream of even greater power, thinking that he could become more than human, leaving his fragile body behind, and began to become as powerful as a god. In his mental projections, he encountered a race of psionic creatures, the Ilithids or Mind Flayers. He devised a risky plan to transcend his mortal form and reach a step further in his quest for immortality and divinity. By sacrificing a large number of the Dani psionics, he was able to amplify his mental power through the probe and reach and invade the mind of an elder brain to plant in his mind the idea of invading his own homeworld. Nautiloid spelljammer ships invaded the skies of the Dani civilization, bringing with them tentacular horrors of the Mind Flayer, and many looked for the great leader Doj for support. All actions taken by Doj only helped the conquering alien invaders. For the people of their homeworld, the Mind Flayer invasion was a losing battle, and the previously unbeatable Emperor Zempo Doj seemed unprepared for the confrontation. The now elderly Emperor Zempo Doj proved to be a leader incapable of confronting his enemies, making successive strategic errors that led to the fall of his empire and the destruction of his people. Soon, the Ilithids ruled by the Elder Brain would take the region by force, and its population was turned into slaves or food for these tentacular horrors. All this tragedy and devastation was part of Doj's bold plans. In one of the battles, he managed to capture a pit of tadpoles from the Ilithids and used one of them to infect his own old and weakened body. As the tadpole invaded his brain, he used his psionic powers on the creature to protect his own mind and individuality, avoiding losing control over his memories and identity while undergoing the process of Ceremorphosis. When the transformation process was completed, his body became that of an Ilithid, no longer human, but in complete control of his mind. He helped the Mind Flayers conquer his own people, enslaving the Dani and feeding on their brains. The wars of conquest of their homeworld were devastating and left the Dani Empire in absolute ruin. His true goal, however, was to reach the Elder Brain who commanded that group of Mind Flayers, and who now resided deep in the underground tunnels of Mount Macab. He knew that when a Mind Flayer died, the brain was given to the Elder Brain to be absorbed and become part of this entity. Using his psionic powers to protect his individuality, he planned his own death so that his brain would be taken and integrated into the Elder Brain, so that he could usurp the control of the creature and gain the powers of the gigantic Elder Brain with a lifespan of thousands of years. He killed his Mind Flayer body, and using his mental powers and iron will, kept his dissected brain alive while it was handed over to the Elder Brain to become a part of it. His plan was successful, and his brain quickly took control and became the dominant personality of the Elder Brain, which held no mental protections against attacks coming from its own brain matter. However, Contact with alien secrets and knowledge from hundreds of powerful Ilithid brains ended up breaking his concepts of reality and morality. No longer human, over the centuries he forgot his mortal name as Doj, but still retained the desire and ambition to become a god. The Elder Brain hunted down and drained virtually all psionics from the tiny homeworld to power the probe machine and project its alien mind across the universe, to learn and control everything in its path to ascend as a god. When almost the entire tiny population was destroyed or enslaved, with almost no psionics left, he began to imprison mind flayers from his own colony to be sacrificed on the probe, to expand his powers in search for the secrets of the universe. Some believe that he has discovered horrifying truths about the multiverse, revelations that have driven him mad and caused the illness that now consumes him. Others claim that this degenerative disease is caused by the constant internal battle for control of the Elder Brain between Doj's mind and the brains of dead mind flayers. The fact is that the brain showed signs of the madness and disease that consumed it, and now demanded constant attention from its servants to maintain the balance of its chemical pools of nutrients in order to avoid death and madness. His plans for ascension to godhood and crimes against the Ilithid race itself would not remain a secret for long. An alliance of the Elder Brains from different Ilithid colonies was formed, fearing the power of the Ilithid God Brain and the spread of his strange degenerative disease, and banded together to confront him. The psionic forces involved in this battle were intense and completely devastated the tiny homeworld, transforming it into the desolate lands of Blutspur. Some believe that the God Brain was surprised by the attack and used his power to move his homeland into the misty nebula, becoming a prisoner of the mists. Others say that this vulgar display of his powers and atrocities committed by the Ilithid God Brain attracted the attention of the dark powers, and the mists enveloped the region and swallowed it into the demiplane of dread. Whatever the case, the region has become the domain of Blutspur, and the God Brain is now its Dark Lord. Within his domain of dread, the Ilithid God Brain became even more powerful, but found himself unable to project his mind beyond the confine of his borders. Not even making great psionic sacrifices to the probe, he is able to send his telepathic powers to distant lands, and is no longer able to explore and invade minds in the most distant reaches of the universe. He now depends on the actions of his Ilithid servants to peer into distant regions using the probe. The only role he can play in using the probe is as source of psionic power, allowing the machine to torture him and temporarily drain his capabilities. After condemning many to a painful death by draining thousands of psionics and Illithids for his purpose, it is the Ilithid God Brain who suffers the pain and torture to feed the machine with his psionic energies, under penalty of finding himself completely blind and imprisoned in the confines of his domain. The isolation of Blutspur and its Dark Lord became even greater with the arrival of the Grand Conjunction, while his domain, which until then integrated the core of the Land of the Mists, became physically isolated by the mists in the demiplane of dread. Surrounded by a nebula of mists, his contact with his new world and prison is now restricted, and he also depends on his servants to kidnap victims, slaves, and seek the psionic and ancestral knowledge he needs for his transformation into a deity. This monstrosity, with the desire for divine ascension, is still dominated by the mind and personality of a megalomaniac abusive man who dreams of becoming an immortal god, but who has to fight a disease that consumes him and threatens to destroy his ambition. He is desperate to find a way to escape his prison of mists, and will attempt any experiment, no matter how immoral and dangerous, to gain knowledge that could save his existence or lead him out of the demiplane of dread. Bluetspur and the Ilithid God Brain got a new version for the 5th edition in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Despite some small discrepancies in the descriptions of some locations and creatures, the domain's purpose remains the same. The new version, however, presents an interesting use of the domain, with the theme of abductions and alien implants. One of the proposals that I found interesting as a narrative form would be to present Blutspur adventurers as terrible lost and suppressed memories, as if the adventurers were gradually discovering traumas and previous experience in the domain, of which they had no memory, making them question their own sanity and even reality itself. Despite everything, Blutspur in the 5th edition is not very different from what we have presented so far, which is why we will not make any specific video for this version of the domain. Our minds are ravaged by this alien entity, and we will soon face final destruction. Our glimpse of his past does nothing to mitigate the extreme pain we feel in every nerve of our body, and we begin to beg for a quick death. All this pain and suffering activates something bestial and sinister in our minds. We feel our bodies transformed into hideous lupine beasts, driven by fury and a basic survival instinct. Since our capture by Bluebeard, our blessed amulets of Hala have been taken from us, and we were no longer protected against the transformations of our cursed lycanthropy. Our torments and torture at the hands of our captors have made us forget about our curse, but its imminent wrath of extermination awakens the beast that resides within our souls and bodies. The Ilithid God Brain has absolute control of our human mind, but for a moment he is surprised by this bestial and animalistic mind, and we escape his domination. This moment is all we need, and we leap upon the grotesque Ilithid aberration to sink our claws and fangs into his brain matter. The horrible taste of this creature fills our mouths, and after many centuries the infamous God Brains knows physical pain once more. Its instinctive reaction is a psionic explosion that expels us far away from him. For a moment, our wolfish minds seem to float in the void, before we realize that we are no longer in the depths of the God Chamber, but back in cell 319 in Darkcloud's Heimfrost Asylum for the mentally disturbed. As a reflex to searing pain, the God Brain uses his psionic gifts to teleport us as far away as possible, expelling us from Blutspur back to Dominia. None of the medical staff appear to be guarding the empty cell, and no one expects the lupine beasts to arrive. In fury and savagery, we fight our way out of this damned asylum, tearing apart anyone foolish enough to try to restrain us. In the woods surrounding the asylum, we wander, but we are unable to leave the island. When the day arrives, we become human again. We hide in the forest from groups that try to hunt us. We desperately need to find a way to escape this cursed place, and without the means to find a boat, we only have one alternative left. We search the secrets we discovered while exploring the asylum with the help of the Ward Zero conspirators, and remember about a portal and mist trail to an unknown location that could be accessed from the tomb of Annabeth, Dominiani's deceased wife, at midnight. When the time comes, it's our turn to try a bold plan. This time, to the surprise of the Cloud and his servants, we jump the walls back into the asylum property. We quickly are surrounded by his masked cerebral vampires and ghouls, but none of them can follow us as we enter the hallowed grounds of Annabeth's mausoleum. We call Annabeth's name as we enter the interior of the crypt. That Sunderleaf seems filled with mists, and we are transported to a distant location and find ourselves in dark underground tunnels. Join us, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and in the next videos we will explore the mysteries and horrors of Timor. But first, there are still two domains that we previously presented in the channel and that had new versions for the 5th edition. In the next video, we will present the new version of Borca as presented for the 5th edition in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft.